Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this a little bit dreary morning? It should clear up, though, for the race. Everybody doing okay? Well, if y'all would, we're delighted to have you here as a part of our private opening for 24th tribute to Jeff Ford. Please give a warm round of applause to John Bickford. John played numerous roles with Jeff that we'll get you to learn about here in just a second. In addition to being his stepfather, he was his car builder, he was his crew chief, he was his mentor, he was his business manager, and actually still is that part. You manage the whole relationship with so many outside entities. And John, I think maybe the best place to start, and I've read this story a couple of different times, is the first time that you brought, I think it was a quarter midget home. I think Jeff was 4, and his sister was 6 maybe. Talk about the first time Jeff saw a car and got in a car and what you saw then.
Let me say a couple things before that. One, I was also married to his mom, which is a good thing, and I still am. So you listed off everything, and I think that's pretty important. She's a monstrous competitor in any family that's out there who does some of these things. You know, it takes every member of the family to make things go forward. So I get all the credit, and I often get the opportunity to say Carol should get as much or more credit than any of us. The other thing I'd like to say is that coming down here, I thought, you know, membership should have its advantages. So most of the stories we're going to tell today, no one's ever heard before. So I think it's important for you guys to know that there's always the untold, and there is the behind-the-scenes story that's never actually written about. And I'm going to try to make sure that you get to hear literally have never been told before, because I think that's the importance. In some 20-odd years have been going on, and so this is the year where in special events like this we're gonna actually open up the box and let a few of these secrets slip out for, as I say, members have advantages. So back to Winston's question, we were racing bicycles, and Jeff, as you know, he's not a great big guy now, and he was a much smaller guy at 5 years old. And his mother kept watching the ambulance leave the bicycle track, and she said, "Don't you think we should find something else?" And I said, "Sure, you know, if you, well, I just don't want him getting hurt." So I had been racing, and I had a friend, and I knew he had some little cars, and so I went up and negotiated, and for $450, I bought a little trailer, small cars, and I brought them up in front of the house, and I went in, and I said, "Carol," I said, "I think I got our replacement right here for the bicycle racing." And she got to the front door, and this look on her face, "Are you kidding me? We're going to go from bicycles to cars?" And about that time, Jeff pushed his mother aside and never stopped running until he jumped in one of the cars, and he said, "Oh, we're going racing, you know." And he literally couldn't get him out of the car. His sister, she's going, "I don't want any part of this. I'm not getting in the car." I said, "Kimberly, there's no motor in the car." "I don't care. I'm not getting in the car. I don't want to get in the car. I'm not going to drive the car." And his mother, Carol's just shaking her head, turned around and walked right back in the house. I thought, well, the divorce is coming. But actually, after a little bit of explaining and everything, I said, "I'll put a roll cage on it. It's got seat belts. It's safer." I said, "Truly, it is safer." And so as it proved to be safer. So that's how we got to quarter midgets.
Well, what John said about some of the behind-the-scenes story, Kevin and I had that pleasure when we went to talk to John about doing this exhibit and putting it together. And you know, it was probably less than a 5-minute conversation about if we're going to do it, but then how we're going to do it, and we got to hear a lot of the stories. And Kevin, you might want to talk with John about kind of some of you guys' conversation of how we landed on the cars that we did, and what's available and what's not, because some of it's just not out there.
Yeah, you know, it's always a lot of fun because we don't have a permanent collection. It's not like we talk to John and say, okay, well, we've got all these 9 cars in the basement and we want to display them. You know, whatever we do here, whether it's Glory Road or the Hall of Honor or the Great Hall, we always start with a topic, and then Buzz McKim or whoever it is on our staff has to start ringing doorbells and picking up the phone. And it was just a lot of fun. You know, for this, we haven't had open wheel cars. So we talked about some contacts that you had, Fred Eade, Raleigh Helmling. You know, so it was really great for the Hall of Fame, you know, to reach out and talk to some of these things. And you know, do you know some of the stories about how some of these folks came into possession of these?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting stories. First of all, we were kicked out of California because we couldn't race out there, and we had built a sprint car in 1985, and many writers thought that probably prosecuting me for child abuse would be the right thing, given that I put a 13-year-old in a sprint car, you know. So, and a sprint car is the first car that down here, the black 6 car. That particular car had about a 750 horsepower motor, and after I got done working on that, the car belonged to Terry Winterbotham. We had it down to about 1,250 pounds. So you can kind of do the math on that. It's pretty badass fast. So we ran that car at half-mile tracks. I think we ran one small, kind of a 5/8 mile track, a lot of quarter-mile tracks all through Indiana and so on. But the story goes, to get to that car, there's a few other steps. We went to Florida in a car I built, the yellow 16 car, which there isn't any that I'm aware of out there that are complete that we could put on display. And we got back to California, and they said, "No, you got to be 18." I said, "Well, we can't wait 5 years, you know." So we started hunting around, found it in the Midwest. We could actually run there. So we said, well, let's see. Our long-term goal is to run Indianapolis 500. We're going to do the same thing that Al Unser Jr. did and some of those. So this all makes sense. We're living in a big town in California, and the schools and everything there are kind of questionable as to, you know, what goes on in the schools. We need to get Jeff out of there, and we need to get him to a place where he can get a good education. Work ethics in the Midwest and all are a little bit different with farm kids and stuff. And we'd been through their quarter midget racing. So we sent Carol to Indiana to buy a house. And we kept working on the cars. She buys us a house. Jeff and I show up with a picture in our hand. There was no address. She said, well, it's on a street by a corner that has that big oak tree just down from that golf course thing out of that little town. I think it's called Pittsburgh. And then there's another town, I can't remember the name of it, but it's that giant oak tree. Remember that tree? And just go down that street. I don't know what the name of it is. And here's a picture of the house. I said, do you have a key? She says, no, they don't lock their doors. So she said it'd be okay. There won't be anything in the house. That's how you know it's actually the house. So Jeff's got a picture. We're in the truck and trailer, and he's got a picture. He said, oh, it ain't that house. And she said, well, it's the third house. Well, okay, I guess one house, two houses. So it must be this house here. Yep, pretty much looks like it. And I said, well, she said we could get the truck and trailer in the driveway. Well, take the fence down, because we can't get the truck and trailer in the driveway. So we had to take the fence down, drive in there, and that became our home in Pittsburgh. And there was no key, and door was never locked. And when we sold the house to the Eade family that owned the Silver Crown car here, Fred said, he's from Fresno, he says, you going to turn the keys over to us? Yeah, I would, but there's no keys. So I said, if you want a key, you're going to have to relock the door or something. I said, Fred, we've never locked the door. We've lived here 7 years, and the door's never locked. So I said, it's just how you live back here, I guess. I don't know. So, but anyhow, we built a shop, and we ran out of money. And we were trying hard to get to Indianapolis 500. We still had a few years to go. Bank account was getting down there. And I thought, well, being a parent and having your son race for you, you need to really learn how to drive for somebody else. So Gary Stanton hired him to run 3 races. Marshall Campbell hired him to run a race. And we were always racing with the black 6 car, and they weren't very successful. They would run towards the front, but rarely took home the trophy. And I went to the car owner, and I said, you know, we're kind of out of money. And I said, you know, Jeff's doing pretty good. I'd like him to work for somebody. I think you're a great guy. Your family comes. We like to be in the family thing. And I said, any interest in maybe hiring Jeff in 1988? I can bring these sponsorships with me. I'll work on the car for you. I'll do all this stuff. And Jeff was hired. I think the story goes, they'd run the 6 car for 28 years and in USAC and various local races and had almost won a feature. So in 1988, we won 26 features and 4 track championships. They'd always ended the years a little short on money and owed a little bit to these people. Terry told me, Terry Winterbaum, the owner, told me that he had about 10 grand in the bank, 3 fresh motors, all new wheels and tires, 2 extra chassis, a brand new trailer, and everything was paid for. And he couldn't understand how we did that. And I said, well, we kind of race for a living, so if we're not making any money, it's sort of, we're going to be losing a lot of weight. So, you know, we got a race to eat. We ran 130 features that year at a variety of tracks around Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, and everything like that. Had a tremendous amount of success. And we went on to race for them the next year for about half the year. So great family, and we were really proud to have a lot of success with them.
Before we take us through these other cars, what is it that you saw at whatever age it was that, okay, you know, you're a dad, so your kid's going to be better than everybody else. I mean, that's normal. But what is it that you saw that, you know, this kid really does have some talent, and what was it that you saw that made that connection to be able to race so well?
Seriously, I think any of you that have kids in any ball and stick sport, I don't think that you spend any time believing that you're going to Major League Baseball or NFL football or the NBA because your son's or daughter's tall. I think what we do as parents is we do all that we can to prepare for the next event. So we were able to win our whatever today, and we have another one next week and another one next week. And winning is, it's almost like a drug, and it's also a stress. So you win today and you're very excited, and boy, you want to have that feeling again. So you go and position yourself to get that feeling again. And then after you get that feeling about 4 times, you're scared to death that it's never going to happen again. And so you have to go to this next event to just check yourself to make sure that you really can win. And then you go to the next one. Then you get more and more stressed that you're not going to ever win, and you're going to get there and you're not going to win. And oh my God, if I don't win, have I failed, and I'm never going to be able to do this again. And you go through these emotional highs and lows and everything like that. Next thing you know, you've been doing this for 5 years. You know. Now, my role in that was to try to chart some type of a plan to an end game. Because remember, I'm starting at 13 in a sprint car. Most people start at 18 or 19 or 20. And my goal is to arrive on the scene at an early age at the Indianapolis 500. That's the only part of our real plan that failed. We never got to do the Indy 500. We were very fortunate as we got down this pathway, and we'll tell that story in a few minutes. But you don't really ever think about that. You just go on and on and on.
Well, it's interesting because you talked about doing all that you can as a parent, and you walked us a little bit through before we got up here about what you were able to do, you know, and he refers to, we have a video of him in 1991, he says, the one thing that I want to do is always be in good equipment. And we know he's been in good equipment through Hendrick Motorsports, and he was good equipment. Talk a little bit about your role and some of the tweaks that were done. You know, you talked about the number 4, that was really out of the box thinking, some of that. You know, so a lot of our fans, you know, they're car folks, and they like to know some of that behind the scenes stuff. You talked about things that I can't describe because I'm not an expert on the panel. But talk a little bit about, you know, the number 4 and some of the tweaks that you did to it just to make it ultra competitive.
Well, I think the idea of putting your kids in good equipment, I've been racing a long time, and I used to tell people all the time, you know, when you're born and that doctor gives you a pat on the rear end, it doesn't say you have 5 crashes at, you know, this speedway and 2 crashes speedway, and over here on the left side, you're going to be a race car driver. None of that actually exists. And the only reason people crash is their head's on crooked, the car doesn't handle correctly, or they just don't have the talent to drive a car. So what my goal was is to always put Jeff in the very best car that I possibly could. We started in quarter midgets, and we practiced and practiced, and I'd adjust, and I'd get the car as fast as possible. Now, Jeff would complain about that because in quarter midgets, you had to start at the very back of the pack, and he'd say, Dad, I can't win from the back. I got to pass 7 cars because there would be 8, and he said, I can't win. I want to start farther forward, and then that way I can win. And I'd say, well, Jeff, you didn't win anything if you don't pass all the cars. I mean, what did you win? You know, just a trophy. I'll buy you a trophy, and we can skip coming here to save all this time. Well, obviously that wasn't going to happen. But so the point is that it's very important in racing that you surround your driver, in my case, you know, stepson, with the very best equipment that you can afford. Drops back to that story about the 6 car where I'd run short on money and I wasn't going to be able to, but pooled amount of resources, we were going to be able to put a winning car. Well, during the course of that time, other opportunities came up, and actually, there's a side story that's not been told. And Winston, I don't think you've heard this story. We were struggling along and trying to figure out how we could get into the upper echelons of racing, and I made a call to a guy named Chocolate Myers, and I said, hey, what's the chance of talking to that Earnhardt guy? And he said, yeah, sure. He said, I'll let him know. And he said, what do you want to ask him? I said, I don't know. I just want to see if I could get get some pointers and stuff. So my phone rings one day. I think it was about 1988, and I answered the phone, and he said, Earnhardt here. Oh, Mr. Earnhardt, how are you? Get that kid off the dirt. You're not going to do anything on the dirt. Click, dial tone. Hello? Hello? Mr. Earnhardt, are you not there? All right, so what does that mean? Well, we started looking out there and we said, okay, there's going to be some TV races. We need to get on the asphalt. So my good friend Bob East and I was making some parts for him, kind of what I did, and I said, Bob, what do you think about this TV thing? We don't want to go down that speedrome. It's terrible. You know, they just wreck all the time. And I said, yeah, okay. So we get a call from a guy named Larry Newber, and Larry says, hey, we're moving this Thursday night Thunder. We're going to move it out to IRP, the 5/8 mile track. I'm going, oh, man, we're going to put these little midgets on a 5/8 mile track. I don't know. That sounds pretty dangerous to me. So we sit down with Bob, and, well, what do you think? He said, well, let's go talk to this Raleigh Hemling. So we drove down to Louisville, Kentucky, ran their track right there by Churchill Downs, and we're watching this race, and Raleigh has a guy named Bruce Fields in the car, and the race is over. Bruce ran about 15th out of 18 cars, and as he passes a finish line, he runs into some guy, and he flips the car down the straightaway and grinds the roll cage to pieces and bangs it into the fence. It's all tore up, and Bruce is okay, but the car's junk. Well, Bob and Jeff and I are standing there, and Raleigh's hanging his head, and we're going, well, we drove all the way down here. Now we're going to ask the guy to drive his car. His car's a piece of junk, and he couldn't drive the car. Now, Bob, he's a car builder, and so he saw the marketing side of this, and puts his arm on Raleigh and said, Raleigh, why don't I build you a new car? And you're probably not going to hire that driver you just had in it. I got this little guy over here. I think he could do a good job for you. And Raleigh looks over at Jeff, and he said, what do you drive, scooters or something? And, you know, Jeff said, no, I drive a winged sprint car. Oh, you drive a winged sprint car? Yes, sir, I do. Well, you think you can drive a midget? And Jeff's kind of going like, are you kidding me? I got an 8-cylinder, 750 horsepower wing sprint car on half-mile tracks, and you're worried about me driving this little 4-cylinder, 200 horsepower. This thing is like a toy car to me, you know. So, but you can't say those things. They'd insult the owner, you know. So after a little bit of talking and a couple of days, he calls Bob and he says, okay, I'll try this Jeff Gordon kid out. But he said, we're going to run next Saturday night. Bob and I had like 9 days to build the car. So we started bending tubing, and we started putting it together, and I'm making all the pieces, and we built this car. And Jeff shows up, and we go to Indianapolis Raceway Park for the night before the 500. and the history books, he got quick time, set the track record, and won the race. And it was the first race Raleigh had ever actually won. He'd had John Andretti in the car before, and they'd finished second and thirds, and they'd won a couple of little local shows, but they'd never won a USAC national midget race. So that was the beginning of a lot of wins for Raleigh and championships and things. So that's how that all came to be.
So you had all that success in open wheel. You mentioned that the objective was to get to the Indianapolis 500. Most people, if they follow racing a little bit, have heard about Jeff going to the Buck Baker driving experience. But I don't know that everybody's heard the backstory of how that happened. I think that may be something of interest that leads us to this number 67 car, of how you guys got hooked up and the deal that you made to get him there. And go back to the Ken Schrader discussion that we had earlier. I had not heard the Schrader part of it until earlier this morning. So
membership has its advantages.
I am a member, just for the record.
You better sign me up. As the story goes, we're trying hard. We're running this midget. We're in front of Roger Penske. We're in front of all these people, and the opportunities aren't coming. And my job is to kind of look out in front of and see where Jeff's going, because you're just going to use up money and time. And he's starting to get close to that age where he could actually do some different things. We created an emancipation piece so he could actually run the Silver Crown car. We're up to 18 years of age now and everything. And we're running with a guy named Ken Schrader in the Silver Crown, and he was sort of our hero because he came from some open wheel. He won a midget championship. He won a sprint car championship driving for Blackie Fortune back in the 70s. And so we kind of felt connected to Schrader. And I went to Ken and I said, hey, I don't think we're going to make this Indy 500 thing. Those cars that you run, that you run in that for that Mr. Winston guy or something. I don't know what that is down there. Why do they call it the Winston Cup? Is there like a Mr. Winston or something, or who is that? And he says there's cigarettes. You really don't know? I said, I don't know anything about those things. They got fenders on them. I don't know anything about it. And I said, but Jeff's never driven anything but his pickup truck and his mother's car. I said, we don't know anything about fenders. And he said, well, why don't you go down to Buck Baker Driving School and see if, Jeff likes it. I said, well, that's a great idea. I said, you know his number? I don't know his number, you can figure that out. So we call information from a town called Rockingham. I'd never heard of Rockingham before. I'd never been to North Carolina. Got this guy on the phone. He said he was Buck Baker, and I told him who I was, and he had no idea who I was. I said, well, I got a kid, his name's Jeff Gordon. Oh, yeah, I've seen him in the papers. And I said, what do you think about coming to your driving school? Sure, we'd love to have you come to the driving school. It's $4,000. $4,000? Wow. I mean, we don't have $400. So I get a hold of Larry Newber, and I said, Larry, got a great idea going to the Buck Baker Driving School, but it's $4,000. I said, you think we could find a sponsor, or where can we find some money? He said, I don't know. He said, let me call Terry Linger, who's a producer of the ESPN Saturday Night Thunder. He said, that might be of interest to them. I said, okay, I'll call Buck Baker. So I called Buck, and I said, hey, Buck, if Jeff were to bring Saturday Night Thunder, ESPN's production crew down here and film this and put it on TV, what kind of a discount would you be willing to give us? He says, it would be free. I said, all right, I'll confirm. So end of the day, we were able to put all this together. And another part of the story you don't know. So now you remember Jeff's 18. We're in the Bible Belt area. You can't rent a car at 18. And in the Rockingham area, you're not going to go in and sign up for a hotel at 18 years old. They kind of look at you with a real strange look while you're showing up. So Jeff's mother had to go with him, fly down here, rent the car, drive him to, and of course Jeff's doing, my mother's with me, oh my God, I'm trying to, so Mom, stay at the hotel. I'll be careful with the car. I don't want anybody to know you're with me. So he goes over there, like an adult, does the driving school with his mother hidden out at the hotel. so nobody will actually know that. And he goes to the school, and he does quite well. There's a guy named Hugh Connerty. Now, Hugh Connerty, for those of you who follow NASCAR a little bit, is the son-in-law of Leo Jackson, who was the owner of the 33 Skoal Bandit car that Harry Gant drove. This is a big family, trust me. And I know most all the names. So Buck Baker calls Hugh Connerty, who has a car at Rockingham Speedway, because he was a wannabe race car driver, and he would come along and prove that he wasn't a race car driver on a regular basis at Rockingham. So the car would just sit down there. Buck says, look, Jeff, I got this guy. I called him up. You might be able to drive his car. Okay, fine. So Hugh comes up from Jacksonville, Florida, and introduces himself, gets in the car, drives around a lot, said, Jeff, the car is perfect. He said, go and take a few laps, but he said, don't push it too hard. He said, you got inexperience. So Jeff gets in this 67 car here, which wasn't actually numbered 67 at that moment. He cruises around the track a few times, comes in, and they said, well, what's wrong? Well, you know, the car probably needs a track bar change. He said, I don't think the front tire pressures are right in the car. It's got a kind of a push. I think we should change the weight in the car a little bit. Maybe let the left side down. And they're all looking at him and say, you only driven a stock car 100 laps, and you're telling, well, you know, cars are cars. And they said, Jeff, we asked you not to push on the gas. Oh, I wasn't. I was just kind of checking the car out. He said, well, you were 3 seconds a lap faster than Hugh. And so Hugh's over here shaking, you know, and he's going like, would you come to work for me? And yeah, but I don't want to work in a Hooters in Jacksonville. That's the stores he owns. He said, you know, no, I'm going to put this race car together and you can drive it. So on the spot, he hires Jeff Gordon to drive for him in 1990, and they started putting this car together. Well, he called his father-in-law and he says, hey, look, I hired a kid, but I don't have anything other than this car. Who can we get to? I don't have a trailer. They said, well, we'll get Steve Barkdahl. Okay. Andy Petrie can help, and you guys have all probably heard of Andy Petrie. That was Steve Barkdahl's best friend and the crew chief on the 33 car. He can help us out a little bit. And they got this guy up in New Jersey. Never heard of the guy, but I think he'll come down and help us. We'll give him a call. His name's Ray Evernham. So Ray Evernham's running super modifieds, and they said, hey, Ray, we got this hot shot open wheel kid down here. We're going to run some cars. Would you come down here and crew chief it? What's his name? Jeff Gordon. Oh, yeah, I read about him in the papers. He's never driven a stock car, has he? No, that's why we need your help. Yeah, okay, I'll come down and help you for a couple. And so the 67 car was created. Ray Evernham was put on it. Steve Barkdahl, who currently owns this car, was a part of it. Andy Petrie and Leo Jackson were all consultants to help this whole thing. They tried to run Charlotte. It rained, actually, October 1990. They didn't get the job done there. Couldn't qualify. They went to Rockingham 2 weeks later, put it on the front row. And so that car was second fast to Dave Mader at Rockingham in, what would that have been? That would have been late October.
October of 1990. Remember that vividly. I actually did the first interview on MRN with Jeff that year. We've just got a couple of minutes left, and I hate to fast forward through the Busch Grand National days, but he's driving for Bill Davis. Talk about the story that got him hooked up with Rick Hendrick, and then the rest of the story, of course, is history. I know folks want to hear about kind of what happened behind the scenes there.
I'm not real good at one-word answers, am I? Membership has its advantages. You guys got to book me for more time. The stories are way too deep. Well, you know...
yeah, we'll come back and do this some more.
We'll have you on staff soon here. We'll just have to seat you up. You're actually going to sit here for the next 3 months.
You got my office with these stories.
So anyhow, I think a second needs to be given to Bill Davis, because what happened was that Hugh Connerty couldn't run the car past the end of 1990 year. We had a war going on. He was in the restaurant business, Outback restaurant business. They just were concerned that the revenues weren't going to be there. So Jeff was basically out of a ride almost before he actually had a ride. There was a test opportunity at Rockingham, and Bill Davis, because of a call made by Larry Newber, was willing to let Jeff drive the car. Bill Davis is a guy really committed to racing, really a real super individual, gave Jeff the ride, made a commitment. We ran the Carolina Ford dealer car in 1991. That evolved into the Baby Ruth car, which is behind us here. The Baby Ruth car was it was a real performer. Part of it was because Alan Kowicki and Ray Abraham got in all but a fist fight in 1992 at the Daytona 500, and I went over and brokered a deal with Ray to come to work for Bill. Bill didn't have enough money to pay him, so I went to Lee Morris and said, Lee, he's Ford Motor Company, would you pay half his salary if I pay half his salary so we can get Ray over here to help out Bill? Okay, fine. I went to Bill, I said, Bill, we got Ray's salary covered. This all assumes that Ray doesn't make a big improvement on the car. If he makes a big improvement, you pick up his salary. Fair deal. They went to work, went up to Hickory, went down to, in March to Atlanta, and lo and behold, he wins the race. Well, when they took off, the car was pretty loose. Jeff had quick time. He's up in the front. Rick Hendrick is there, and he's walking up the grandstands, going up into a suite to watch a race, and he stops with a friend of his because this crazy kid he'd never heard of is driving the car through turns 1 and 2 with the right rear tire smoking. He said, well, let's just stay here and watch this kid bust his ass. He obviously doesn't know what he's doing. And he said, I can't believe he's made 5 laps with the right rear tire smoking here. He said, it's only a matter of seconds here. Just wait here for a minute. Well, they waited, and the car kept going. All of a sudden, the car runs out of gas in the back straightaway. Ha, he's done. So the car coasts around. Just as that car coasts around, yellow flag comes out. In he goes. He gets fuel, starts at the back of the pack. Rick's going, now wait a minute. We'll see what happens here. He passes. He gets all the way past. He wins the race. Rick says, I don't know who he is, but somebody needs to call that guy. I want to talk to him. And after a few weeks of Jeff saying, there's no way Rick Hendrick wants to talk to me. He already has drivers. He's not going to put another car. I'm not going to go down there and embarrass myself. I'm not going to go talk to him. And I've got to get your ass down there. I want you to talk to Rick Hendrick. And so with a little bit persuading, Jeff drove down to Monroe Street office and sat down, and Rick said, here's what I want to do. Would you be my driver?
You're right. You told us earlier we could do this for 3 hours, and I think we could all enjoy that with the event we've got coming up. We're not going to, but I want to get your perspective. Okay, we're basically 25 years later, and looking back, one of the most asked questions I hear this year, looking back on Jeff's career, how do you see his legacy as either a dad or as a business partner or a race fan, which you obviously are? How do you sum up Jeff's legacy in NASCAR racing?
You know, I'm hunting for that answer. I've been asked that question a couple times. I've probably answered it 2 or 3 ways, but I think Jeff's going to be probably looked at as the Lewis and Clark of NASCAR. You know, he's charted a lot of pathways. He basically was presented himself prepared for an opportunity. Rick Hendrick presented himself, and all of a sudden car owners were willing to look at young guys. You know, they looked at guys like Kenny Irwin, and they looked at Tony Stewart's, and they looked at those. He has a passion for children. He started the Jeff Gordon Children's Foundation, and you know, now we have the NASCAR Foundation. We have, most of the drivers have foundations where NASCAR as a group is doing more through philanthropy than almost any sports organization there is out there. I mean, we're doing real things and having real impact on a lot of different areas, and that was all, you know, Jeff did that. He's going to go in, and I believe he's going to make a big impact on television. I think what he's going to bring a technical side to it. He's going to work hard to bring new information. I mean, we all have our Apple phones or our Androids, and we all want instantaneous information. Likely we all Google for our answers. We do all these things. I think he's going to bring a whole new dimension to television. So I think 15, 20 years down the road, I think you're going to see people say, you know, I think that Jeff Gordon was a path maker. He changed everywhere he went, he made change for the positive.
Well, many of you have heard me say this before about Jeff. The thing that I'm most impressed with is not what he's done on the racetrack, but it's how he's done it and what he's done off the racetrack. And from that first time I talked to him beside this car in 1990 to the times that he's driving this car, he doesn't treat me or anybody else different. And in my opinion, that starts at home. So I think we're honored to have not just his crew chief and car builder and mentor, but we're honored to have the guy who molded Jeff Gordon into the quality and class person he is with us. John, I can't thank you enough for being here. We will definitely do this again. Kevin and I were at his office, I guess, 2.5 hours, and thought we were imposing on his time, and we kept, we kept asking questions and getting more information, and I learned some more this morning. John, thank you so much for helping with this exhibit, being here, but most of all, bringing us Jeff Gordon.
Well, I'm honored to be here, flattered, and membership has its advantages, so promise to bring me back. There's a whole lot of stories we can tell you, and I don't even have to get into the R-rated stories. We can keep them all in G-rated stories. We can have you going for a long time.
We will definitely have him back. Big round of applause for John Bickford.